Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina, Made to Create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Abby Riba, who owns Harbor Sales, the manufacturer of the ViviLux line of lights, lasers, and magnifiers in Clearwater, Florida. Born and raised in the Chicagoland area, Abby has been garment sewing since she was 16, and she's largely self-taught. A custom dressmaker for more than 30 years, specializing in bridal and evening wear, she's a charter member of the Association of Sewing and Design Professionals, served on the board in various positions, and was national chair for 2 years. As a dedicated sewing professional, she's developed a suite of tips for working with difficult fabrics and fitting uniquely sized people. Abby parlayed her dressmaking and her learnings of the home sewing business into 2 successful businesses. Kandi Corporation brought hot fix crystals and embellishments into the DIY market. After she sold this company, she developed Harbor Sales, bringing lights, lasers, and magnifiers to market. When not running her successful business or sewing, Abby likes to spend her free time needle pointing, hand embroidering, or cooking. She is a cook of real Chinese, authentic Chinese food, and loves to test out Italian cuisine. She currently lives in Safety Harbor, Florida, with her husband, Dave. Abby, hello, and welcome to So and So.
Hello. Nice to be with you, Meg.
You know, we're going to talk a lot about sewing, but this cooking that you do sounds pretty interesting. But I want to jump into the sewing. Now, yours is really a story of leveraging your love of sewing with your entrepreneurial spirit. You grew up in the Chicagoland area and learned to sew at 16. So, how did you learn to sew, and who was your inspiration while you were learning?
I had 9 weeks of sewing in high school, and then again another unit in high school. And that should have turned me off to sewing right then and there.
Uh-huh.
But I was 14 years old and reading Vogue magazine. I could not find any of those garments to fit me. I couldn't afford any of those garments. So that's when I really began sewing. I also, after Dave and I got married, our daughter was and remains uniquely sized. And by that, I mean she was wearing toddler 2 clothes at 6 months. So if I didn't sew for her, she didn't have garments. And then when she got older, she stopped growing. So she went to high school looking like she was 8 years old. And if I didn't sew for her and make the clothes like everybody else was wearing, she looked like an 8-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
So I really honed my skills on making clothes for her and my son, who again did the same thing. And I still sew for my daughter occasionally, and she's been long gone out of the house.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was a great incentive for you to learn this, and we're going to talk in a little bit about working with difficult fabrics and sewing for uniquely sized people. So you started in high school. It sounds like you didn't like it at first.
I enjoyed it, but what I was taught and what I was not taught in those 2 classes should have turned me off right then and there,
Mm-hmm.
because I understood. I mean, the first class, everybody had to make a vest. And of course, they didn't fit. But the second class, which was 2 years later, I looked at it and said, I've got to make a mock-up of it first. I didn't know it was called a muslin. I had never seen a sewing book. I had never seen anything else. But I knew that if I went to the good fabric, it wasn't going to be right. So there were things in sewing that just made sense to me So I made the mock-up, never got around to making the regular garment, but that is how I learned. I'm working with this fabric. I have a machine that does straight and zigzag. How am I going to keep it from fraying? I know, I'm going to buy bias tape and just bias tape all the raw edges.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that was a thing. That makes sense. And that's how I did a lot of my sewing to start. It just made sense to me.
Sounds like there was a little bit of an instinct
Yeah.
there with this. Abby, what is it about sewing that means so much to you?
If I say, personally, I'm a clothes horse and I can do it myself. I love working with the designer patterns. I mean, I can't afford to buy a Chanel jacket or a Gucci outfit or Givenchy or anything like that, but I can make them. It's being able to have that higher style than I can personally afford, or that I would be willing to spend. I mean, I'm not going to spend $15,000 for a dress.
Mm-hmm.
So I can say, I can make that, and I can make it for a lot less. So that's what's inspiration. And also, I have my own fitting challenges. So I turn around and I can fit myself and have the clothes look and fit the way I want them to, as opposed to having to. I hate alterations. I can do them, but I hate them. Having to buy a garment and then alter it. And that's a lot of the people that I sewed for were uniquely sized.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that term because there's nothing wrong with anybody's body. They don't fit the standards either for ready to wear or a sewing pattern. And I can slice and dice that pattern and get it to fit.
So you learned to have your own version of what you saw in that Vogue magazine and then make that available for uniquely sized individuals.
Exactly.
Now, you've developed several tips for working with difficult fabrics. Would you share a couple of those with us?
Well, there is a stitch on most sewing machines that looks like the number 7, one right after the other. It's a small zigzag, about a 0.5, followed by your regular straight stitch. And for somebody who has a lower end machine and doesn't have that stitch built in, you can mimic it. And what it does is give you some built-in stretch in your seam. So, and you can press it open flat. So if I'm doing a velvet and attaching a lining, if I'm doing a knit, I will use that stitch so that nothing is going to pop, and I'm going to have some stretch in there, and it's not going to be too much thread like the triple straight stitch.
Mm-hmm.
I also, when I have very slippery fabrics, I pin in an X formation. I don't pin parallel to the seam line or perpendicular to the seam line, but I make X's. And that way the fabric is going to shift less than if I have just regular pin, and I'm not going to be ripping out stitches and starting over again.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I decided to redo my bedroom, and I was working 100% quilting cotton in order to have all the seams match. I folded under part of the fabric on one side, put on fusible web, and then fused it to the next piece of fabric, because I had my crease from where it was pressed. I could open up, stitch it away, and then trim away all the excess. So everything matches perfect. And I will do that with plaids or other fabric because I'm a stickler for matching designs.
I know our listeners are going to want to know more of your tips, and at the end of the podcast, we'll be able to tell them how to get in touch with you because these tips and tricks are just wonderful, especially your story of working with them yourself. Now, I want to talk about Kandi Corp, um, which is fascinating to me. You found the opportunity to bring hot fixed crystals and embellishments to market. I think I always just took for granted that they were there, but you are the one that really did this. How did you identify the fact that this was a good thing to do and then start the company? Tell us a story.
Well, first of all, I was seeing the hot fix on ready to wear at that time, and we're talking 2000, 1999, that time frame.
Hmm.
St. John's Knits was using it. Some of my colleagues were using it on their bridal wear. I had cancer in 2001 and closed my custom dressmaking business within 1 week because it was, you have cancer, your surgery is next week.
Oh my goodness.
So I refunded monies. I finished up things. I said, you will be in tomorrow to try this on and let me finish it. I had burned out. Ever watch Say Yes to the Dress? And
Oh, sure.
you've seen some of those brides.
Sure.
I had burned out from some of those people
Hmm.
and the bridesmaids and the mothers. So when I had recovered, I was looking at this and said, what do I want to do? I'd gone to wholesale markets. I'd understood the business from the business end of it. So I knew how to market to the stores, how to market to distributors. So contacted Swarovski, who has now gotten totally out of the DIY market, and said, this is what we're going to do. And my salesman said, yeah, right. And then told Dave, whose business as a computer consultant had slowed down dramatically because this was right after September 11th.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody was using computer consultants at that point in time. So we started working through the logistics of the business, of designing and finding a manufacturer for the applicator, because everybody had been putting them on with an iron. And I said, that won't do. We need a way to put it on with the applicator. Developed that and went to market with it in January of 2003.
Mm-hmm.
So it took us that long to get everything together. We tested out the market by doing a couple consumer shows. It went very well. Started doing more consumer shows, and then started picking up the major distributors like Brewers in order to sell into the stores.
Mm-hmm.
We then started adding metals. We started adding lower priced crystals because not everybody wants or can afford the Swarovski, and did quite well with it for a number of years. We were knocked off several times, and it got to the point where it was just more than we wanted to do. It was turning into a commodity,
Mm-hmm.
and we sold the business. And the one thing I will say, both with our current product line and with the Kandi line, we always stayed with the independent stores. We did not go into the
Mm-hmm.
chains.
You know, I think it's a badge of honor to get duplicated, knocked off like that. How did you name the company Kandi?
We had a couple companies that we had incorporated that were sitting dormant, and we just used that one.
Mm-hmm.
And the other line that we had in there was Lorna, L'Orna, and that's my middle name without the apostrophe.
Oh, I love that. That's great. So you became a commodity. Your idea was so good, people copied it,
Yeah,
and you decided that's enough. You sold the business, and then you developed Harbor Sales, which brings lights, lasers, and magnifiers to the market. So, what gave you an idea to do this next?
it was more a matter of what do sewers need? And I don't care. I think I'm on about my eighth sewing machine.
Mm-hmm.
And I get very nice, very expensive machines. But most people can't afford the top of the line or near the top of the line. And the lower price machines have terrible light.
Mm-hmm.
Even 2 years ago, I got a Bernina 770. And I'd had my previous machine for about 12 years, which was a top of the line, and it had terrible light. It didn't put the light where I wanted. So the first product we did was the little light that velcros onto the sewing machine and puts the light where you want it. I want it on my needle. I don't need it in the harp. I don't need it in other places. I want it so I can see what the needle is doing. I'm watching to make sure my plaids and my stripes are lining up. I'm watching to make sure if I'm doing a beaded lace for a bridal gown that I'm not sewing over a bead and breaking a needle.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I need to see. So that was the first product we developed. And we made sure, I don't know what your sewing room looks like. Between two sewing machines, a serger, an iron, and other things, I don't have a free outlet. So it's on a cordless rechargeable battery. So I don't have to worry about trying to find another outlet to plug in the light.
Mm-hmm.
I just put that on. I've got it. I plug it in the bathroom when I need to recharge it.
Mm-hmm.
That's closest to my sewing room. But that was something I needed. So that was the first thing that we developed. The laser came second when about 5 years ago, some of the sewing machines started coming out with lasers. And there was one sewing machine company that offered the same machine with or without a laser. And the price differential was $2,000 to have the laser. And I said, we can do better. And so many of this, in fact, all the sewing machine or companies, you either get a dot or a line.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I need both. And I need to be able to put it just not on the throat plate, but anywhere I want it. So again, I sent Dave off to find the engineer to develop it and to get the tips to do what we want. And we came out with that. I can put my line at whatever seam allowance I want, from 1/8 of an inch to 5 inches if that's what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I can use my dot for curved piecing or applique work or to follow a stencil or the design of the fabric. And like I said, I'm fussy. If you ever see my husband again, look at his shirts. I make all his shirts.
Mm-hmm.
You can't tell where the pocket is because that pocket is perfectly lined with the fabric. So I need to be able to see all of that and use the dot to see where I'm sewing that. And I have a crosshair that I use to make sure everything is squared up, or if I'm doing machine embroidery, to make sure I'm in the center of my hoop, because I'll align that with the north, south, east, west notches, and I can see exactly where my center is.
I did get to meet you and Dave at Bernina University, and what you are saying about his shirt pockets is 100% true. And I've seen your products that you bring to market, and they're pretty amazing. So, in addition to coming up with these different products and things, you're running a very successful business. What's that like? And working with your husband?
Working with my husband can be both frustrating and easy. Um, the easy part of it is I understand the sewing end of it. I understand from having sat at a sewing machine 5, 6 days a week for 5, 6, 7 hours a day, what a sewer needs. He has a business degree and the business end of it to be able to say, okay, here's where I have to contact in order to get this product developed. Here's what we have to charge. Can we charge that amount? Can we not charge that amount? What price point do we have to be? How do we have to ship and do all of that? So unless we are loudly discussing the creative
That's a perfect description. I like that.
the creative end of it, no, we need this. Why? What does it have to do? Why do you have to have this? And getting him to either understand or saying, okay, we'll do it as an upgrade. We're off doing different things.
Hmm.
So we do not have as much overlap as if we were in a large corporation and we were had 25 people that we were dealing with. One of the disadvantages of it is sometimes it can be all business, all day, all week, no time for anything else because it is our business.
Do either one of your children work with you?
Our son did for a while. Our daughter lives up in Boston, in the Boston area.
Hmm.
Our son is down here, and they don't quite understand us. They never quite have.
Uh-huh.
And I have two very different children personality wise.
Hmm.
So when our son was between jobs, he did work with us for a while. It's better that he doesn't.
That is not unusual in families. Abby, you call your products ViviLux. How did you come up with that name?
Lux is the French word for light, and Vivi is an abbreviation for vivid.
Hmm.
So the fact that we are doing very bright lights is how we decided to use that name.
Seems like it's a perfect fit. Now you've talked about how you develop your products from the understanding of what a sewist needs rather than some engineer developing a product that isn't quite right and then trying to force that into the marketplace. You've talked about this a little bit in some of the specifics. Can you tell us a little bit more about this? Certainly, you as a sewist identify pretty quickly the things that you need.
Not to disparage them, but most engineers are men, and most of them aren't using the end products that we have. So, and I will grant that a sewing machine has a certain form factor, and whatever improvement or new feature you're going to put in has to fit within that form factor. But since I'm doing add-on products, I don't have to worry about the fact that it's got to fit into this area of the sewing machine, and this is all we can do. Because I'm saying you Velcro it on, or if you have an older machine, you can use a magnet. I can put it anywhere I need to. And that's one of the reasons that we did it, the products the way we did.
Mm-hmm. Now, you have been a charter member of the Association of Sewing and Design Professionals. You've been on the board. You were national chair for 2 years. Would you tell us about this association?
This is an international association, largely of custom clothiers or people who are in the sewing and design business. So we have pattern makers, we have authors. Claire Schaefer is a member, Sandra Bettina is a member, Sarah Veblen, who teaches classes, is a member, Susan Kalji is a member and teaches. So all these people are together and working both to educate the home sewer and educate the new sewer coming into the business, and also for us to network and compare with others. What are you doing? How do you handle this situation? Why are you doing it this way, not that way? So it improves each of our own businesses.
Mm-hmm.
And it also helps us when we get stuck with, you want me to do what? How am I supposed I'm supposed to be doing what?
Yeah.
To be able to call out to a friend and say, hey, have you done this? Do you know what to do here? And so it's a very useful organization. And it's also trying, nobody wants to be ripped off and nobody wants to rip off a customer. But we also discuss what is fair pricing. How do we handle a difficult customer? What do we do in this situation? I had a contract that if you wanted me to make a dress for you, sign. And I agreed to do the following things. Here's what you agreed to do for me. Well, my contract got changed because it was, you will not have breast augmentation done after we have fitted the muslin.
Oh, my.
Because I get 3 times that happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's things we learn from each other and saying, hey, this is what happened. You might want to consider adding this to your contract. Because I guarantee you those dresses did not fit properly.
I can only imagine.
Yeah. So it's really a way of networking.
Sure. Now, as a charter member, you've been around there since the inception. How long has the group been around for?
We started in the early 90s. There was a dressmaking group, I don't remember what it was called, based out of Portland, Oregon, that took the concept to what was then the Home Sewing Association, who helped them go national.
How many members?
You know something, I think we are at about 400 right now. And we have members in Canada and we have members in Europe. There is a yearly convention this year. I think it is in Denver. There are ads for it in Thread magazines. And anybody is able to attend and take the classes. The only thing you cannot do is vote in the election. So there's still time to come if you want.
And it's a group that I had not been familiar with, but the more you talk about it, I can imagine this is just a wonderful opportunity for people to learn, to network, to share stories, just like on this podcast. Abby, what inspires you these days?
I still go Snoop shopping when I get to cities that have highly expensive stores.
Snoop shopping, I like that.
And that's something any sewer can do. Go to the best, most expensive store in your area and look at the construction of some of these garments. How are they putting it together? What are they doing? It's a fantastic way to get inspired. How are they doing their narrow rolled hems? What have they done? What are their seam finishes? I won't tell you how old I am, but I can remember garments seeing more French seams and non-serged seam allowances in higher priced clothes. And for economic purposes, I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Less fancy, less couture, even in the better ready to wear. But look what they're doing. Take your inspiration from that.
Mm-hmm. So you're a student of the process.
Yeah. Are they lining it? Are they half lining it? What are they lining it with? Look at all of the. I look at all of those things in deciding how am I going to do what I'm making.
Mm-hmm. So what's next for you? What's your dream?
I want to go to Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It was one thing I regretted when I was in China, because I was there in the winter months before COVID. There were no artisan studios that we could get to. I would really like to go to some of the artisan studios in Japan where they are still making kimonos and obis and weaving some of the fabric that they're using, to see all of that. I'm lining up my sewing projects for the fall as we speak. When we were at Bernina University, I got a notice that an event I'm going to, everybody has to wear white for the party. So I'm doing a muslin of a suit jacket for my husband so that I can make him a white suit. And I bought some fabric for myself, and I'm doing a muslin for myself of the dress I'm going to wear for myself. But I have until February, so I have a little time. Thankfully, she gave us that much notice.
Yeah. Abby, you had mentioned earlier in our conversation that you had had cancer. I think it was in 2001.
Yeah.
How's your health now? How you doing?
I'm doing fine.
Great.
It was colon cancer. They got it in time. And I regularly go for my scheduled colonoscopies to make sure that we stay clear.
Good for you.
And I would urge everybody at the proper age to start doing that.
Indeed.
Because trust me, you don't want to go through the surgery.
Well, we're glad that you're okay, and thank you for that nudge to people to make sure that they do that. I'm with you 100%. So, Abby, we've talked about so many things today. This has been great. Is there any question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
No, just make sure that Dave gets credit where credit is due, because he is the business end of it. It's not just me.
Indeed. And he's also the tech support on your end for you being in this podcast. So thank you, Dave. Abby, this has been a great conversation. I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today. Now, I mentioned earlier, I know folks are going to want to reach out to you. So what's the best way for them to do that?
To put my email address, which is Abby, ABBY, at Abby Designs. And it's very important you have an S at the end, because there's somebody else who's Abby Design.
Okay.
And she's a jeweler. AbbyDesigns.com.
All right.
And put in the subject line podcast.
Okay.
Because if I don't recognize your email, you will go into the trash.
Uh-oh.
And
okay.
And this way, if I see the word podcast, I will turn around and know that this is somebody that I need to talk to.
Perfect. And I'd love to know who reached out to you from the podcast. I have no doubt there will be several. Abby, thank you again so very much for joining us today.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Well, there you have it. Another story about someone just like you, someone for whom sewing is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@soandsopodcast.com or just complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, review, and rate this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, soandsopodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.